Hello everyone and welcome back to the ROKER RAPPORT podcast, where everything is absolutely horrendous, so horrendous that as a means of emergency we have had to form an emergency coalition of Sunderland fan media outlets. So today we not only have the ROKER RAPPORT representing the ROKER RAPPORT, but we also have Love Supreme, Wise Men Say and SAFC Fan TV, but more to that in a second. What you need to know if you've been under a rock, if you've had the merciful ignorance of not watching Sunderland as of recently, the depression has deepened on Weir side as we have lost yet again our 7th defeat in 11 games to Burton Albion, because, you know, that's such a classic fixture that we love to lose these days. And yeah, everything's just pretty horrendous. So let's kick off this podcast in association with Vaux Brewery. I am first of all joined by Martyn from Love Supreme. How you doing?
I'm all right, thanks. A little bit hungover.
But given recent things, would you say just about okay, relatively speaking?
I'm okay, yeah. Football aside, I'm okay, thanks.
Fair enough. I'm also joined by Chris Weatherspoon from Wise Men Say. How you doing, Chris?
I'm good. I am not hungover, which was not what I was expecting to say this one. So.
No. I suppose if there's no Sunderland game on the Saturday, though, there's not much of an incentive to get to a point where you're hungover.
Yeah, I mean, I had quite a pleasant night. Went out for a nice meal. Didn't think about football at all. So
that's lovely.
More like this, please.
Yeah. If only that was every weekend, given how things are going. And I'm also joined by Shaun Middleton from SAFC Fan TV. How are you doing, Shaun?
I'm good, yeah, thanks. Fresh,
yeah. Well,
a surprise for a Sunday, like, but I'm actually okay.
I suppose, incidentally, I'm also feeling quite all right this morning as far as not being hungover goes. So that's 3-1, Martyn. You know,
I'm letting down the side.
Yeah, so it's like a mini case study. This, like, how many people in the room are hungover when Sunderland haven't played the previous day. But yeah, that's pretty much where we are. So let's just get straight into the review of the Burton game, and we'll go in chronological order of how the week's gone, I suppose. So, you know, we played Burge, McLaughlin, Willis, Lynch, Hume, Power, Leadbitter, Watmore, O'Nine, McGeady and Grigg, with the subs being Maguire and Benji. Obviously, we lost 2-1. It was a pretty horrendous game, but rather than me whittle on about it, let's go straight to our guests. We'll start with you, Shaun. What did you make of the game?
It was really poor. I think it was just come to the conclusion now that, I mean, I've said it for a while. I said about Jack Ross, he wasn't good enough, but then you've got to look at the players now. The players were absolutely gutless on Tuesday night. Absolutely pathetic. We've changed managers. Parkinson's come in. Has anything changed? Not really.
Well, I would argue yes, for the worse.
I mean, he's stuck with the same formation. I mean, I don't know what you think on the 4-2-3-1, but it just doesn't work. I mean, I was expecting a manager to come in and change things around. I mean, just change the formation and get, you know, the players. They've got to look at themselves in the mirror and see, you know, it's just not good enough and it's not acceptable.
Why exactly do you think it didn't work, Shaun? The lineup against Burton.
I think our midfield's too slow. I think our defence, I mean, isn't too bad now. Lynch and Willis, Glatton hasn't had a great start, like, but just our midfield, Leadbitter's too slow, and there's no like quick movements. I mean, January kind of come quick enough, to be fair. I mean, people say, well, why are you starting with Leadbitter and Power? But who have you got to replace them? I mean, I watched McGeady the other night on YouTube when he scored a wonder goal for Celtic when he was 18. I'm thinking, why is he not playing? Can he not like make a difference in that team? Do you know what I mean?
He's looking more and more like one of those what-if players, isn't he? The ones who are brought in with a lot of reputation, but then just don't get a shot. I mean, we've had loads of those, obviously.
It just seems to me like when we play lately, when the other team get a goal, we'll just fold, and then it's just like they look at each other and say, what do we do? I'm thinking, he's a professional footballer, so you need to like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wear the shirt with pride.
It's quite an alarming sort of reminder of where we've been in recent times with the likes of Moyes and Grayson and Coleman. We're starting to see that sort of toxicity seep back in, which is quite a concern. What do you make of it, Chris, the whole scenario in and around Sunderland at the moment?
Yeah, I think one of the more concerning things from Tuesday and like a few recent games was that anytime something particularly positive happens, we don't seem to actually build on that. So like, obviously we beat Tranmere 5-0 in Parkinson's second game, and everyone was like, oh well, like they've let the shackles off, like we never saw this under Jack Ross, like we wouldn't have won that game 5-0, which I actually agreed with at the time. But the problem was, after that they went down to Shrewsbury, they got beaten. To be fair, down at Shrewsbury they were unlucky, but it just seems like Tuesday night was like, those 2 minutes were like a microcosm of it, because we basically went 1-0 up, concede immediately. And I actually thought the first 10-15 minutes, I thought we looked quite decent on Tuesday night, certainly a lot better than we had against Coventry at the weekend. But then just all sort of kind of positivity and, I don't know, confidence just seems to flow out of them. And like, what's really frustrating as well, I thought was, you know, like second half, I thought, despite the fact it was turgid, the fans actually got behind them, and the people were singing in the second half. People were roaring them on. There was a spell where we looked like we were going to build on it. They went and scored, and that was it. And we just completely collapsed. And for me, look, I understood why they got rid of Ross. I'm not one of these who ever really it takes a lot for me to turn around and see a manager like needs to go or whatever. But to me, when you watch them, they look like they look like if you didn't know how many games Parkinson had, you would think he's like in his second season or something, and the players have stopped playing because there doesn't appear to be anything there. It's like I say, Shrewsbury played quite well. We were unlucky. Hit the woodwork 3 or 4 times, was it? I can't remember.
No, it was 3 times, yeah.
That's not what it's been for the last month, and the wheels have come off like really, really quickly, and it is concerning. And I don't think it's just the manager. I think there's a lot deeper issues, but people I know you said there, Shaun, like January can't come quick enough, but you've got to earn it. You've got to earn the right to spend money in January, and I don't know that this manager's done that. And
this is it. I mean, is it going to be too late by January? Because then half is, and like also, how many times have we signed players right at the start of the window? It's like once the window's open, then it when does it close? It drags on, doesn't it? And then it's the 1st of December today. Realistically, when will we complete the signings? Probably in almost 2 months' time,
And the thing as well is, like everybody in football says, the worst time to sign people is January, because clubs, if clubs don't need to get rid of someone, they're not going to get. I know it's amplified like in the Premier League and that because there's a lot more money in play. But if clubs don't need to get rid of someone, they're not going to do it.
Yeah, you can only really. And who wants to come to League One? Who's decent? That's the problem. And also, like if we were in a decent position to go for it, like we were under, like say Keane, then players will think, oh well, I'll drop down a league for like 6 months and I'll be playing at a higher level the following season. Whereas coming to Sunderland, well, obviously we don't know what position we're going to be in, but
No.
It's not at the minute. It's mathematically we're not that far off, but at the same time, if you ignore the league and just see how they're playing,
And if
they're just not playing well. I mean, I was kind of thinking with all these Parkinson stats, I was trying to sort of tell myself that we weren't actually as bad as what we are. Like, so many of them were cup games, and you could, if you want to make excuses for them, you could say, well, the Wickham game, he'd been there like less than 48 hours. The Shrewsbury game, like Chris pointed out, should have won any other day. The chances that we had, obviously Tranmere 5-0, and then there was all the cup games, and I was thinking, well, I don't want to watch Sunderland lose ever, although obviously I've done it all my life. But at the same time, I wouldn't be that bothered if we were out of all the cups. And then we are. But then I thought the real test is going to come against Coventry and Burton, 2 like functional League One teams who know exactly how to mix it up and also like good on the counter attack. Yeah. And I thought, well, obviously we need 6 from those 2 games. And then after we drew the first one, it was like it's going to be 4 hopefully, and then 1 is just
it's just not good.
It's just a disaster. So obviously everyone's saying, well, if this was your money to spend, if you were in charge of the football club, would you employ Phil Parkinson to spend it? And has he done anything so far to give you any confidence? I
think it's got to be a categorical no, just based on how things have gone. Sadly, what I look at as well, and I think it comes back to what Chris said. It's a very interesting point. Is that you do have to justify getting to January. I mean, I know the bloke, like he was it wasn't even that long ago he was appointed. But if we're saying already at this point, oh yeah, but he needs to wait till January, what you're effectively doing there is already resigning this first half of his tenure as a failure.
Yeah,
exactly. As an excuse that he needs to compensate for. And
if this is his system that he plays, you could argue that you haven't got the players to play it.
Yeah.
But then, so why play it? What I mean? Why not play another system?
The thing is as well, why hire him? Like if the idea is that we know what this group of players can do, don't hire a manager. Like everyone knows what sort of football. Like I heard a Bolton fan described it as like meat and potato football, which I think is pretty good.
In a meat and potato league, it's probably,
exactly.
Probably what you need if you've got the players. It would be different if we had like you could go like, oh well, if Gooch and White were fit, not that like the world beaters, it would probably fit into the system more. But I think you should have just changed it for those 2 games because we have got players who can hold onto the ball. Which we showed under Ross, but like now it's just get it forward to someone with no energy and no pace, lose the ball.
What I thought was interesting was like Wickham, he came in, very much put his stamp on it. It was just every time we got the ball, it was just bump, bump, bump. It was awful, and they were better at it than us, unsurprisingly. Against Tranmere, now I know Tranmere were terrible, but we did actually move the ball quickly. Got the ball wide. There was a bit of movement in that. Since then, there's been like very little of that, and it's kind of like, I think, Shaun, you hit the nail on the head about the midfield. Like, I remember in the summer when George Honeyman went, and a lot of people were quite happy about it, but one of the concerns I had was, well, are we going to have anybody who's got a bit of energy? Because at the minute, you've got Power and Leadbitter there. And I mean, I don't know why, but half the time it seems like Power's playing even deeper than Leadbitter. And I think we can all probably agree Leadbitter's legs aren't his strongest point.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think that's the thing with
no.
McGeek as well. It's like in this system, there's probably no point in playing Leadbitter or McGeek because they're kind of like ball retention players where, like moving the ball around, which worked under Ross. But obviously by the time we got the ball into the final third, all their players were back behind the ball.
It was the same on Tuesday night. I thought there was times when I was watching, I was thinking, just don't like hoof it, but like move the ball quickly. Like let's get up, and you watch it every time. Like by the time we got the ball over the halfway line, they've got 10 men behind the ball, and you're like, it's so painfully slow.
Just side to side all the time.
Yeah.
We haven't got like a player who can in the middle who can like run at defenders or and with that killer pass. We haven't got that player like at the minute.
I don't know whether Dobson was meant to be that guy, but for me, so far he's been hit and miss. But look, what is he? 21, 22, and like. I think that you've alluded to it there, Martin. Like we've got a lot of midfielders who are basically exactly the same.
Would you all agree? Obviously, that Jack Ross, his time was up. You think it was the right decision getting rid of Jack Ross?
Well, at the time, it seemed very much so. Yeah.
I did at the time, but I mean, with the managers, what was linked, Phil Parkinson wasn't even on my shortlist. Like, but obviously, you've got to give the bloke a chance. But I think. Looking at it now, do you think he's...
Well, at the time, it was, if I remember correctly, you had Stendhal and Ainsworth in the frame, and I would have taken either of those over Parkinson.
Definitely.
And in hindsight now, that's obviously no different, that opinion I've got.
No.
But I think the concern is, look, like they got, like, having been down at Lincoln a couple of days before they got rid of Ross, like that was the worst I'd ever seen. It might have been in the last month. But I think, I liked him. And I was probably one of the last ones to see he should go, but I think it was becoming obvious that it wasn't working. The problem I thought the timing of it was very interesting. Like 4 hours before a game, they got rid of him. And then like we were told that they got rid of him because like the underlying performance data or whatever wasn't good enough. Right? Okay, fair enough. To me, though, if that's the case, that you're not making that decision on the back of one game, which you shouldn't anyway. But to me, it took them 9 days to get Parkinson, and it took them 9 days to seemingly decide that Parkinson was the right man for the job. Now, if they decided that, that's fair enough. But first of all, he was out of contract, so if we knew that the way it was going with Ross, why weren't we talking to him before then? Why weren't we getting him in? Everybody said, oh well, if you sack him before the international weekend, Parkinson gets a bit of a grace period. He can come in, he can put his stamp on things properly. But as you said there before, Martin, he only got 48 hours before a game against a team that was second in the league. And to me, look, I don't know if we're going to go on to this, if we're going to say about, is it already time's up for Phil Parkinson? But the problem I have with it is, do we have any trust that the guy that they go get in now is going to be the right guy? Like I say, that
it's always the problem, isn't it? I think like that. Obviously they could have sacked Ross in the summer. Because his remit was to get us promoted, and he didn't. Ross could have also left in the summer. He was offered jobs in Scotland. He thought about leaving.
But he's admitted, hasn't he?
Yeah, exactly. His dad talked him out of it, And in hindsight, we should have just sacked him in the summer and then have more time, because Ross took the piss out of pre-season. Basically, all the players came back in decent shape because it was like the shortest pre-season in the club's history, 69 days. So he decided only to have 4 pre-season games, but then also change the system with players who couldn't understand the system. So we started off the season already on a back foot. Everyone was already on a downer from the end of last season and exhausted.
Spent 4 games, didn't he, trialing a system that no one could understand.
But obviously we've kind of gone through all that now, haven't we? So it's just a matter of, and I think the time that it took to appoint the new manager, in a way, wasn't excusable, but at the same time they had to interview everybody and talk to everybody to decide the right man for the job instead of like rush into it, and obviously then they did. I'm not saying that Parkinson was the first choice, but But yeah, like everything's pretty much just gone wrong for him since, and he seems to need us to have like a Charlie Wyke type player who, to be fair, against Wickham didn't really fit into that system that well anyway, because I don't think he's that great. But for his system to work, and it's all right for him now to say, well, I need all these players in the transfer window, but you know, how long before the transfer window did he come into the job? You know, he needs to be coping better with the here and now, and then obviously in the meantime, people are starting talking about giving him the sack, which probably before the Coventry and Burton games to me was stupid. But those were the games he really had to like turn it around in, and he's failed basically. So it's
I agree with what Martyn was saying. I mean, that was my philosophy. I think in the summer, when we got beat off Charlton in the playoffs, I think it was a good point there where the owners could look at the season. It was a failure. They could have gotten rid of Jack Ross then, and then it would have had more time in getting the new manager in, and then he could have, you know, looked at the squad, see what we need to improve on. But we're stuck with Ross, and I think that's where the problem lies. I think sticking with Ross, and it's just like he's brought the players in. As the recruitment being good, no, not really. But it's just you know, you got to look at the owners as well. I think, you know, they've got to look at themselves and think, well, they're stuck with Jack Ross, and they've, you know, it's went wrong. They've bought Parkinson, and was Parkinson the right choice? If they got rid of Jack Ross at the end of the season, they might have gotten a better manager then. Do you know what I mean? It just seems to be stem from there for me.
No, there's a lot of sort of uncertainty around ins and outs, transfer windows of summer, the one in January. There's a lot of questions that we've asked there, I think, that call into question a lot of interesting points, but that's probably a very good time to segue into the listeners' questions. We'll start with those, so we'll throw the first one at the panel here from Luke O'Brien, who says, as it's likely we'll need to move players on before bringing new players in, who would you try and offload in January and why? So we'll go to you, Martyn, for that one to start with.
Obviously, it's tempting to get rid of them all at the minute, but it's a difficult one because people complain about Cattermole and Honeyman last year and Matthews, but then without them, are we a weaker team? I don't know if we actually need to offload that many players because we've adjusted the wage bill like so massively. Even though we're still paying Cattermole and Oviedo's wages, they're not actually on the wage bill anymore. So I don't really know how many we need to get rid of. I mean, it would be sensible to try and get rid of Will Grigg, although you wouldn't get any money for him. But then, how many failing strikers do you need at a club in one go? And like, also he doesn't fit into that system. And then Will Grigg might go somewhere else and do slightly better on loan. We can bring somebody else in. McLaughlin, you could say, has been a failure, but then he's been played in loads of different positions, in loads of different systems, and never been given the chance to shine or settle. But I do think we need to sign a right back just so Luke O'Nien plays further up the field.
Yeah.
I think we should have, like, in this system and in this league, we should have like a sort of an all-action, energetic midfield. And at the minute, the three players you'd probably play there, if we're not going to sign anybody else, would be like Dobson, O'Nien and Power, just to kind of get round the bit, you know, like the best we can, because obviously like Ledbetter and McGeoch don't do that. So I think he's going to spend a lot of money up front. Well, a lot of money. No one spends a lot of money in this league. I think he's going to look to strengthen up front and also at right back. So I guess.
What about the wing? What about on the wings? Do you think adequate wingers at the moment?
No, we lack pace in our team, like massively for me. Physicality as well. But I think like you say, pace. We haven't really got. I mean, Gooch is out at the minute, but I mean, I'm not a big fan of Gooch. But to be honest, I mean, when he comes back, I think it'll be actually better for us. Do you know what I mean? McGeady's not the same player as he was last season. I don't know if it's because of the injury.
He doesn't work in this system either, does he? And he's on a downer. And ever since he signed that new contract, he seems to have like...
his legs are good as well, aren't they?
Well, yeah. And he slows the game down. But I think a decent forward with Gooch and Watmore would actually work in the system he wants to play, but he needs more cover. You know?
Yeah. I'd argue as well that the worst position to have an ageing player in is on the wing, because that is a position where your physicality is probably your strongest asset. In this league, where perhaps technique is quite rare at like McGeady's standard, but pace and power is aplenty, because you know it's a much easier thing to develop. In that kind of standard, if we've got McGeady who's aging, his legs are getting, he's getting older, he's getting slower, like Shaun says, then he's gonna basically be a Ledbetter on the wing. He's gonna just slow the game down when he needs to speed it up.
I think the fitness is a big issue as well, because although the likes of Maguire and McGeady are struggling to get through games. I mean, at the minute, if everyone was fit, I would just have them as impact subs. But I think there's a few people need to lose a bit of weight in the team as well. And I think Maguire and McGeady would be playing better if they were fitter, you know. And you only need to look at when McNulty came back from injury, he was out of shape. So I think the introduction of the fitness bringing a fitness coach in like Sam Allardyce did. Hopefully we should reap some rewards of that as the season goes on, because when we're pushing for a result in the last 10 minutes and we need to turn that draw into a win or that 1-goal deficit into a draw, we don't look like we've got the energy.
No.
The other teams look like stronger and fitter and quicker than us.
Yeah, we have. I think we do honestly have an issue of players who at the moment either seem to be too old or have too much weight on. I don't know. I don't know. I just don't think that we have. I think we're a long way off having capable athletes to get promoted, because I just think you do look at them and you think these lads don't look like they're in prime condition for one reason or another. The issue last season and for a few seasons before was that players were too short. But I would take Honeyman and Gooch as sort of like engine over what we have currently.
Definitely,
So that goes back to the previous point. Like, have we sold players to improve? Absolutely not. You know, I think we'll miss Honeyman massively. You know, I mean, I've always sort of banged the drum for him.
I never thought I'd see that, but I agree with you, mate. No.
I think Reece James, I think there was nothing particularly wrong with him. I think he was all right, you know. I think I'd have had him and Hume.
Same as we sell 4 fullbacks. Reece James, Adam Matthews' contract was up. Oviedo, and those other one, Donald Love, and you get rid of 4.
Should have definitely.
And then you bring in who's the 2 brought in again?
McLaughlin, the box.
So you bring 2. So you let 4 go, and you bring 2 in just to bring the wage bill down.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. It's like the owners, they're bringing the wage bill down, but then they're forgetting about the thing that matters the most is the football, the team on that football pitch.
The actual ability of the footballers you're bringing in as well, because I mean, I haven't really seen much about Dubok to be particularly optimistic about.
That's another thing. What Martin was saying. Dubok, McNulty, they're being injured. I mean, we brought them in on loan. They're just you know, what's the point in bringing players in if they're going to be injured for the season? You know what I mean? You need players who's going to make a difference.
This is the big problem, though, isn't it? Like, as much as like. We're going to say, yeah, let's look forward to January, let's get it sorted then. This current recruitment regime has had 3 transfer windows and we've got worse after each one. And I'm sorry, but whether there's somehow strike lucky this January, I don't know, but I haven't seen anything to suggest that the changes have been made to improve that. Like, we know...
Couldn't agree more.
We know from what Ross has said, from what certain journalists have said around the thing, that it wasn't just Jack Ross signing footballers. So if that's the case, it's probably not going to be just Phil Parkinson signing footballers. And it's like, do we have... look, I don't want to know the ins and outs of everything, but from the outside looking in, the evidence so far is that the recruitment team isn't fit for purpose. I mean, we got rid of... You've hit a good point there. And look, Reece James wasn't an outstanding footballer or anything. He might not have even been on people's team sheets. A lot of people might have said Denver Hume would get him before him, but he was allowed to leave for whatever reason, and then we didn't get a replacement in until the very last day of the transfer window.
I think Ross was like very much a fan of Hume, but obviously had injuries last year, but there was no backup for him. But I think that's the point, and whatever Reece James was on couldn't have been that much. Obviously, the other fullbacks, Matthews wanted to go, Donald Love was obviously a waste of time. But
I don't have a problem with getting rid of Matthews, because Matthews is on far more money than his performance has merited. Yeah, like I don't have a problem with that. It's just, it feels like our recruitment strategy a lot of the time, and this is not just under the current regime, this was before, it's whoever's available. Like Dubok, for example, you can't... Look, I could be wrong, but you can't tell me we'd watch many games of him playing football, because he hasn't played that many in the last couple of years anyway.
Panic for that one, didn't it?
Yep.
But when a Leeds fan's first response to the club's Twitter when we're signing him was saying that's for 1973, you see you next Tuesday. You know you're not really onto a winner, and like I think it's too easy for us to like go, okay, like maybe we might have a bit of money, like. Last January we went and spent more money than the rest of the league combined, and we got worse. Like it needs to be, we need to think about it a bit more. There needs to be a more joined up thinking. Now, look, I don't know. Maybe the conversations have been had with Parkinson. He said, "I want this player, this player, this player," and we've said, "Yep, we'll go get him." Fine. I just feel like waiting until January pinning all our hopes on January, it's just kicking the can down the road again.
Yeah.
I think at the same time, it's like, even though we could say the squad's weaker than it was last year or less functional or whatever, I just think that there's obviously something wrong in the dressing room, you know, like lack of leadership, lack of motivation.
Well, Ledbetter has come
know,
out and said it, basically.
Yeah,
hasn't he?
exactly. You know, and like, I mean, I remember I like Grant Ledbetter, but I think appointing him captain was a mistake because he wasn't going to be playing it every week because of his age, and he's not that vocal. You know, he's a quiet lad. What he actually does say when you see it written down is like spot on, but he's not the type of person who's going to like motivate people in the dressing room by like shouting on and bawling. And obviously all the players that are here have probably been sold the club like, we're going to, you know, this is what we're going to do. We're going to get back out of this league and we're going to go, and then it's not working. So they're not working basically. You know, we're not getting the most out of the players. Yeah. So whoever was signed, I think the squad is good enough to be in the top 6 comfortably. I'm not saying it's the
certainly
best.
Better than what we're seeing.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like all over the club. You know, like this time last year when there was more of a buzz around the place, people were performing better because it's easier to do that. It's you know, it's difficult when things aren't going well. But I think a lot of the players need to like stand up and be counted and sort of say to themselves, well, I am a professional footballer, more than capable of playing at this level. So, like, why am I performing so badly?
I think that's a fair point, and I think I'll never excuse footballers like not playing for the manager or whatever, but it does under Ross. There was, to my knowledge anyway, there was never really a tale of like division in the dressing room. And like I know, for example, McGeady, who we know in his first season here did not get on well with the manager at all. Really didn't get on well with Chris Coleman. Now McGeady actually turned around when he signed a new contract or extended his contract and pointed at Jack Ross as one of the reasons why he was doing that. So you do wonder, like, the nature of how Ross was let go. Has that had some sort of impact? And now that's not excusing them, because at the end of the day, the footballers, they should play for whoever the boss is. But if that's created a bit of turmoil, and then Parkinson himself's not a strong enough character, and again, I don't know the bloke, so I'm not going to say if he's not a strong enough character, then like that just causes more trouble. I mean, like we said, Ledbetter, was it the Scunthorpe game or the Gillingham game? I can't remember which one. It was one of the midweek cup games where he basically he wasn't even particularly asked about like division or anything. He just said, "We need
Scunthorpe."
Was it Scunthorpe? Was it?
Just come on and said it.
He just came out and said, "Look, people need to be pulling together," and immediately that sets alarm bells.
It's a
ringing,
very
if you like.
troubling statement for anyone to make at the club. That, and it's
it plays into what we were saying earlier about like kind of everyone's heads dropping pretty easily, because you get this. I mean, look, I imagine we've all seen what like Max Power came out and said during the week in his interview, and I know we used to take the mick out of like rallying calls and stuff, but that was quite passionate from him. And look, I thought he was poor on Tuesday night, but when you watched him, he was visibly annoyed at like his teammates, and he was trying to. And look, he's not the best footballer in the world, but he clearly cares. And now you're worried that if he's having to do that, then why is it that we've gone from a team like what you said there before, that last season everybody was in it together, everybody was up for it? Why? What's changed? Why?
I think it's Cattermole, to be honest with you. Even though he wasn't really doing it on the pitch, like physically, you know, you only have to look at the fact that he was telling everybody to slow the game down 6 minutes into the playoff final so he could conserve his own energy. But he's ran that dressing room really for the last 10 years. And even though Honeyman was captain last year, because they were expecting Cattermole to go in the summer and they wanted to make a statement and everything, it was Cattermole who was running the dressing room. You know, when I went to do interviews, it was Cattermole who was like ticking us off or like asking us stuff. Because he's an older guy who's like more vocal. But now you've lost like Honeyman and Cattermole, and I think it's actually had more impact in the dressing room. And obviously, like Grant Ledbetter alluded to, like you always have little divisions where you'll have a little cliques and stuff. But now I feel as those cliques are kind of like too divided, where obviously we're speculating, but I'd imagine you know, the sort of McGeady Maguire sort of like Scottish clique, you know, if you feel as if somebody else isn't doing their job, then, you know, it's like any job. You know, if you think someone isn't good enough, you bitch about that other person. If you think the new boss isn't as good as the last boss, then you're not going to perform as well for him. You know, whether you work in a corner shop or whether you work for some
you
football
get that,
club, you know?
in any professional institution, you get that.
It's obviously happening now, isn't it? Because they're not performing. I mean, they weren't performing great under Jack Ross, but they're obviously worse now.
Do you think he's lost the? And that's he's only been here a few couple of months. But do you think he's lost the dressing room already? Parkinson.
I don't know. Well, it would appear looking at the results that he's not motivating the players to the best of their ability. I think they need to kind of like all get together, and I don't know whether they have, but like have a big sort of like a big sounding off meeting with the owners, with the management. Everyone sit down behind closed doors, and everyone get their grievances out and move on, or look for a new manager. You know, that something needs to happen.
I always see it in football. I don't know what you think, but a good manager can get the best out of a crap bunch of players. You know what I mean? A good, you know.
We look at Gareth Ainsworth.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing. Like, they're top of the league now, and then at the time we were like, "Well, is he going to be good enough for us? Have they got a better squad than us, or are they overachieving?"
Yeah. I'll be honest. Like, at the start of this season, I wasn't one of, partially because I don't know enough about other League One teams, but I wasn't one of these who thought that we had a team that was definitely a shoe-in for like automatic promotion. And I think if you look at the team on paper, you can see that, because like you've got a lot of people who have played in the league above or who've got promoted from this league or whatever else. The problem I think that we have is, and we've touched on it, is like we've got a lot of players who are much of a muchness, who don't have any real pace in the team, which like you look at Oxford. Oxford have got that Fosu guy who they signed from Charlton. Like, it makes me wonder why weren't we in for people like him, because he's been excellent. He was around last season. He was at Charlton. He left there, so we should hopefully have known about him. So I think, to me, it's a mix of, I don't think the squad's as good as what a lot of people originally thought, but having said that, it's better than what we've seen in the last month, and it's certainly better than, I mean, Parkinson said himself on Tuesday night, and this is a pretty like startling admission from a manager. He said after that second goal was stop playing. Now, that's never acceptable, and that's why, like, I know people argue about whether fans are behind the club or whatever, and that most of the time, mind, at games, fans are behind the club. It's very rare that you hear what you heard on Tuesday night, where you heard four sides of the ground booing mid-game, and the only reason they did that is because you can see that the players had stopped. And people accept a lot of rubbish. People have accepted an awful lot of rubbish. We all know over the last few years, we've all seen it, but people won't accept when they think people just aren't trying.
There's nothing worse, I think, when you're watching, like, you know what, if I was to watch a team of 11 players who were utterly, and we've done it before, like, as Sunderland fans, we've seen it in seasons when was like one of like the season when it went down with like 15 points. Was it 15 or was it
Nick
16?
McCarthy?
We've seen seasons where we've seen 11 players who were utter toilet in the division they're in, but they're grafting, and you think, you know what, lads, this is awful to watch. But as people, I can't begrudge what I'm seeing, and obviously you don't enjoy, you hate watching teams lose week in, week out if they're not very good. But there is nothing worse than watching a team that's not even trying, because it's just undignified. It's like, at that point, it's like if those lads have been employed by the club and they're grafting, if they're grafting for the sake of grafting to try and do the best they can for the team, I can be annoyed at how bad the game is, but I can't begrudge them as individuals for it. But as soon as you hear that players that they've quote unquote stopped playing, what that tells me is that you've just given up. And you know, and like, fans don't come all that way in their numbers just to watch a team give up. Like, it's just in no other profession is that acceptable.
Yeah.
You know, like in any other profession, it's a sackable offence to just give up doing your job. So why should it be tolerated as like a symptom of like something bad happening in football? The same players who make out that they're a symptom are actually the cause. That's the issue. But
they need to be motivated. They need to have confidence, and like sort of the difference between like winning and drawing, or like losing and drawing, is like often that extra little bit. You know, that extra 10%, that 15% that comes with like having confidence in the manager, having confidence in yourself, and like, obviously, the minute the more it goes on, the hard, you know, people keep saying, oh, it must be hard to play in front of these fans. That's like no excuse at all, because there should be.
It's a load of
like,
rubbish.
Exactly.
It's,
like,
it's a total load
like
of
they
rubbish.
should be like, well, do you want to play for Accrington Stanley instead?
Well, this is the thing.
But the point is that, like, for whatever reason, they aren't given that extra little bit, you know, either because of the manager, because of the plan, because of their own confidence and motivation. and that needs to be changed.
I think, like, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the club right now looks like it's drifting a lot like it did 2 years ago, because I think from top to bottom, there seems to be a kind of, I don't know, like a disengagement sort of thing, and like I think that's shown by the players on the pitch to turn out some of the performances that they have. I think, look, like it used to become like a sick joke like 2 years ago when the attendance used to get read out, and we all used to be like, there's nowhere near that many here because they had to count the season ticket holders.
Yep.
Tuesday night, in my opinion, was the same thing. The attendance was 26,000. I think you'd be lucky if there was 20,000 in the ground.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, there's so many alarming parallels.
Yeah. And I know it's a Tuesday night. I know it's freezing cold. It's a horrible night and that. But on the exact same evening a year ago, we played Barnsley, and we were 3-0 up inside 30 minutes, and the ground was rocking. I know they came back and we won 4-2, and you could argue they were unlucky not to get a point because they really did come back at us and that. But the difference between this year and last year is alarming, and it does stretch a lot further than just what's going on the pitch as well. Like there are some serious problems there, and look, Parkinson. Let's not be about the bush. There were very few people who would pick him as their first choice, but it's still pretty alarming that it's gone this south this rapidly. He's not even been in the job 2 months. I think it was October the 15th. So we've been here a month and a half, and he's lost how many games? Ross lost
7
10,
from 12.
Ross lost 10 out of 75. This bloke's lost 7 in a month and a half, and now, as much as he didn't particularly inspire people, he's also, you would have thought he's also not that bad a manager for it to be entirely his fault. So I think that, like I say, I feel like the club's drifting again, and somebody needs to get a hold of it.
Do you think it was a case of with Parkinson, it was maybe the last choice manager?
I think he was the cheapest choice.
Ian's with Stendhal, I mean, them were, you know.
Well, Ainsworth at the time would have required a sum of money to coax him away from Wickham, whereas I think Stendhal would have just asked for more than what Parkinson would ask for, because Stendhal would know his worth a lot more, I think. But I think
there was to be honest with you, I think there was other reasons that there's no evidence that like Parkinson was the cheap choice, and obviously they give him a longer contract than they probably would have wanted. I think with Stendhal there was the feeling that he'd just been sacked, so there was like a sort of negative vibe, and there was already enough negativity, and he'd also been constantly working for a long time without a break. So even though he was one of the choices with Ainsworth, I think the problem was he hadn't managed. Or, you know, like, I think there's 7 employees at Wickham, so to come from, even though they're now top of the league, so it looks a bit, you know. But then obviously Jack Ross is doing well in Scotland, so you're like, you know, you can always do that. You know what I mean? It's a funny one. It's the beautiful ex-girlfriend thing, isn't it? You know, when she starts looking hot again. Yeah. but I think those reasons, for whatever reason, you know, they've employed Parkinson. His record isn't actually that bad in terms of getting teams out of this league and being successful at this level. But obviously we don't want to be at this level, but we have to accept that we are. But I think the other managers, I think they just thought Ainsworth would struggle to run the club as is, and if things didn't go well, and then with Stendhal there was a lot of negativity and a lot of, but then he could use that to sort of bounce back and improve Barnsley.
I was going to say, I think, you know, like, if that was the logic behind not getting Stendhal, like I can see it, but to me, then you wouldn't go anywhere near Phil Parkinson after what he's just had to go through.
Exactly, that's what I was going to say. If Stendhal is
have a break, didn't he?
He did have a break, but to me,
but like if Stendhal's unappealing because he'd just been sacked, then what would that make Phil Parkinson being in Bolton?
Don't get me wrong, Stendhal was my first choice.
Phil Parkinson.
I thought Barnsley were like solid last year.
No, they were great. The thing is, Phil Parkinson has gone through like absolute hell there. Like they didn't get paid for, I don't know how many months out of this year they didn't get paid, and like that's an awful situation to be in, because especially down here, because people think, oh well, like the footballers, they get paid for, like down here they don't.
No.
Like people got mortgages to pay and that, and he was the one having to deal with all that. So I think, look, if that was the logic behind not getting Stendhal, then fair enough, but I find it odd that they would then go and get Parkinson.
Yeah,
I think like a concern for me is, I do feel like we've seen it in the recruitment side of things, and I would argue we've now seen it a bit with Parkinson, is it's kind of like a almost like a football manager approach. Like, what have they done? Like, what have they done before? It doesn't really look at like the circumstances. Like, so when we signed Grigg, for example, I watched his goals last week because I was like, what has changed here? The vast majority of Will Grigg's goals for Wigan was like one touch in the box and that. Now, we don't play a style of football that gets it. And also, they always had a lot of people around him in the box. So it wasn't like, so I remember on Tuesday night against Burton, ball came in the box for Grigg and there's 4 men around him because we didn't have anybody up there taking them away from him.
4-2-3-1.
So you watch Wigan's goals, all you have to do is watch the highlights on YouTube. They've got people bombing into the box. Max Power's one of them. And so it's kind of like, it's as if we looked and went, well, he's got a really good record, which he did. And look, I'm not going to say he shouldn't be doing better because he's missed some absolute sitters at times. But I wonder whether, like, is the Phil Parkinson thing similar? Is it like, well, he's got teams promoted before, like, he'll do it again. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are, he'll do it again. Like, I find it concerning that we are told that this guy had, like, incredible references, this, that, and the other, and he was, like, the outstanding choice. I also find it concerning when Charlie Methven comes out and says, show me a manager who consolidated or kept Colchester in the Championship and I'll show you a really good manager. Now, was he talking about Geraint Williams? Because that's the guy who did that. Phil Parkinson left before Colchester got to the Championship.
Well, that's a very good time, Chris, to go on our next question. We'll go straight back to you after this one. Matthew McCourt says, What were your thoughts on Luke Edwards' comments in the Telegraph this week regarding the owners? He said, and I quote, as for the owners, their charm offensive fell flat weeks ago. The schmoozing with fanzines and podcasts, the chummy pals act on social media, the drinking in local pubs and working men's clubs, all that has come to an end because Stuart Donald and Charlie Methven made so many bold promises and pledges they failed to keep. They talked a good game and failed to back it up. They are as unpopular as the manager and know it. They have spent more time talking about potential takeovers and investment than they have about what is happening on the pitch. They are now seen as chances, in it to make a quick profit, who are now lumbered with a huge wage bill and no results to justify it. That's the end of the quote. Yeah, that's well, yeah, and that is the actual quote, sort of paraphrased.
Has he got a good lawyer?
Yeah. I read that article. He also said people have to trust Parkinson. He has turned clubs like Sunderland around before. He has proven himself adept in a crisis. Give him some time, let him manage, give him a chance. He needs time. I think if you read that article back, he's kind of like just made a lot of bullet points and then like knocked out like 1,000 words.
Yeah, it felt
he never comes to watch Sunderland. I'm not saying some of the things he said there are like aren't true, but I just thought that whole article was like, the only positive was that Sunderland actually got some coverage in the national media by a Newcastle United fan who never comes to watch Sunderland.
No, it's a very it is a very. There's a word to describe how that was written. I'm not quite sure how to articulate it, but it was something. I think
Yeah, I mean,
does he have a good lawyer? That's a very fair question because that's a very.
I don't think there's anything dodgy there. It's like opinion and.
Yeah,
it's not defamation.
The question was, what did we make? I mean, this probably won't surprise anyone that I'm saying it, but I think he's closer to the bone than anything else. With regards to that, I think the proof's in the pudding. Like, look at last season. Like, whatever might have been going on behind the scenes or whatever, you did get a feeling that everyone was pulling together. You got we had let's be fair, we had some like pretty impressive like marketing campaigns and marketing strategies and stuff like that. Now, where's that been this season? What's happened? Have people lost interest? Is like, I don't know, the counter argument would be, well, you shouldn't have to entice people to come and watch the football team play, but actually you do. Like, that's how marketing works. Like, that's that is literally, that's why clubs have got Twitter accounts and whatever else, and that like they want to get people to come and watch a game. And when things are going badly, especially, that's what you need. Now, to me, from the outside looking in, it seems to me like there's a complete lack of direction there. Like, I think the part in the article about talking more about investment and whatever else than what's going on the pitch is spot on. Quite frankly, like, I mean, Stuart Donald went on the radio after the investment takeover law, whatever the hell came out, to talk about that, and then the bit about what was going on the pitch. He said, "Oh well, the start hasn't been that bad. We've got a few games in hand." It was like. He's either just trying to dress it up and stay positive, or he hasn't actually watched, because the start has been dreadful. Like, for a club this size and for the resources that we have, which they were more than happy to tell us we had, mind you, the start has been dreadful. And at the end of the day, look, last season for the vast majority of the season, things were going well on the pitch. People don't really care about what's going on off the pitch if you're getting the results. Now what they're seeing is when you don't get the results, that's when you open yourself up to people saying, well, hang on, what's going on here? What's going on there? And look, I don't know, like we keep talking about January, we keep saying they're going to fix it then. To me, it's too easy just to be like, oh, we're going to spend a bit of money in January. We did that last January. They need to put some sort of structure in place and they need to get it right. I mean,
Like you said earlier, we've spent before, and every time we've spent, I agree, we've gotten worse.
Yeah. Look at Luton and Charlton last year. Charlton were in absolute turmoil, so nobody can say, mind, that we were in a worse position than them. They were in absolute turmoil. They got promoted and they barely spent a penny. Luton likewise. And that is not because they struck lucky on players. That was because they knew what they wanted. They had an idea of it. They didn't faff around until the last day of the deadline and spent far too much money on people, and they went out and got it. Like, it just looks to me from the outside looking in, you just feel like last year there was a re-engagement, whatever the motive behind it, people can argue about that, but they got people back on side. There were a hell of a lot of people who said last year, this is the most I've enjoyed watching us in years, despite the fact the standard of football was demonstrably worse than what we've watched, because you felt like it was your club again. Like, that's what they said when they came in. They were like, we're custodians of this football club. So, okay, great. Like, you've got people back on side. What happened over the summer? Because we were told takeover talk on that wouldn't have an impact. I would argue that it almost certainly has had an impact. Like, look,
I think when people say like it won't have an impact, they know that it probably is going.
Exactly.
You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
it's as if like going, oh, don't worry about that.
And I think so. Also harping back to like initiatives and stuff. I think whatever they came out with now, they'd get roundly sort of like
See,
negative.
I disagree because, like, to me, like, look, everyone knows like I'm a detractor of the current owners, but when I saw,
well, not everyone does, but like,
well,
in your
okay,
life, in your life, they do.
Well, yeah, exactly. anyone who cares about me, so all 5 people know that I'm a detractor. But like, when I saw like the stuff about what they're going to do over Christmas and that, I was like, yeah, that's great. That's what they should be doing. Like this, they came in on. They were like, what we're going to do is we're going to reconnect the community. We're the custodians and that. Great. Like, okay, as long as it's not all just hot air, which, to be fair, last year, they did do things that got people back on side. That's what the club needs. Like, I know what you're saying, like, when we say...
I think they should just shut up for a while, to be honest with you. You know, like, and like, I was...
Okay, maybe them too, personally. I don't have a problem with that, but where's the marketing from the club? Like, for example, Tony Davison left the club a month and a half ago. Has he been replaced? Because we don't have a new director there. So what's going on there? Who's running that side of things now? Now, when he came...
like Mark Mosley left as well, didn't he?
But exactly,
it's
and
weird.
the problem is like those things really, really do matter. Those, like, we might not, when things are going well on the pitch, nobody cares about anything else. And like I say, I'm doing exactly what I've just said happens. When things are going bad, you start looking under the bonnet and think, well, what's going on? Those things do matter. It's a morale thing. It's an ethos around the club. And at the minute, the ethos, honestly, it looks like 2 years ago. It does look like 2 years ago.
It does. I mean, except there's anger and not apathy. Apathy is the next stage, isn't it? You know, like,
That's
when
the thing.
at least when people were getting booed off, I was thinking, well, people are angry about it. They want to do
still care.
something, but like undercut. I remember having a meeting with Coleman, and he was like saying, actually, I wouldn't mind if people were giving us loads of grief, but people have almost accepted the situation that we're going, which is the next thing. But I actually, obviously, with all this takeover, investment, loan, whatever, which has been going on since like February, that's obviously been a massive cloud over it. And I think they should just, I don't think they should have done the recent stuff. I don't think they should have done the Steel stuff. I think they should just like start concentrating on what's happening on the pitch, and run the club without all of the sort of like publicity. Let the manager get on with it. If they don't like the manager, sack him. You know, which did seem insane a couple of weeks ago, but now you're like, well, you know, although if you look at his record in the league, it's if you take the cup games out of it, it's not half as bad, but it's still rubbish. The
problem is, I actually agree with you about what you're saying about like doing the Steels Club and that, because the problem is when Stuart Doyle comes out and says something, when Charlie Methven comes out and says something, more often than not lately, they're saying diametrically opposed things. Like this, they don't appear to be on the same page. Like, Charlie told us all it was never a takeover. Then Stuart went on the radio and said, oh, there were takeover talks. I was like, well, like, you can, if we were winning games, people probably wouldn't care that much. But now it becomes a, well, hang on, we're not winning games. So is the reason a little bit deeper than the players and the manager sort of thing? And when those two aren't on the same page, you're like, well, what on earth's going on here?
Yeah, there's no continuity, and I think also when they do, it obviously it's been good for the fanzines that have been communicating, but I would say from a club point of view, they need to say less, they need to be briefed more, they need to think about their answers more, and they've sometimes like less is more, and I just think they need to shut up for a while and do the talking like on the pitch or with incoming players. And then say, like, this is the way we're running the club, instead of having to explain everything. Ellis Short did 2 interviews in 10 years. Charlie does, like, 2 a morning.
This is the thing as well, like, when they sacked Ross, Donald ran straight to BBC Newcastle to talk about it. And to me, it looks like he's terrified that people are going to dislike him for a decision that he's made. Now, the fact of the matter is, if you run a football club, and if you run a football club as high profile as this one, you aren't going to please 100% of people. Give up. Like,
there's different ways to give that information out as well.
Of course there is,
They could release a carefully prepared statement through their own media, instead of like talking non-stop for an hour and a half. That's for us to do, isn't
Obviously,
it?
having a Twitter account as well, I think that was... it's good that he interacts with the supporters, but he's leaving himself wide open, having a Twitter account and things like that, what I mean?
He isn't. The problem is, like, I'm sorry, but him, like, responding to fans at 1 o'clock in the morning doesn't look good for anyone. Like, it doesn't. It's not sufficiently professional to run a club of this size. Like,
the issue with social media. Sorry, Chris. The issue with social media, with the likes of Twitter, is that, as you say there, because what you just said there, like, it's a very sort of like poignant thing to point out. If he's responding to fans at 1 a.m, if he's getting wound up at people on social media, what that is showing us inadvertently for him is like a window into his psyche of how he's taking this. If he is online at 1 a.m, having a go back at fans who are having a go at him, justified or not, what that tells us is that the owner is rattled by what's going on.
I think it's also like it's opened himself up to criticism, because like people in the past, people were like, oh well, they don't read Twitter, the club don't care, there's no obviously, but having this interaction, people kicking off on Twitter know that like it's probably being read by someone, so they say more,
Yep. Yeah. Because people think the
first time I met them, I was like, well, you need to close down all your social media, and it's taken them a year to do it, and it didn't end. It didn't end tidily, did it?
But the problem is as well, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here, is the moments when he has taken his social media down have always coincided with something going wrong. Like, he first took off from Twitter because he was asked where 10 million of the club's money had gone, and he said, we'll get back in a couple of weeks, and he departed. The news of that Mark Campbell takeover falling through broke, and he went then. And then this time it was the fact that it was no longer a takeover, it was investment, or let's be honest, it was a loan, and he went then. And it's like, well, look, if you're gonna, because I think he said, I've got thick skin, I can take it. Like, well, the evidence suggests that he can't. And now, I don't think, I agree, Martyn, I don't think you should be on there in the first place, because as soon as anything goes slightly wrong, you're going to get this. And the problem we seem to have is like what you said there, Alex, like, his way of thinking is kind of, he gets affronted by it, he gets upset by it. Now, at the end of the day, like, I don't know any football club of this sort of stature where you're not going to get dissenters kind of thing. Like, when he signed Will Grigg, you had probably the vast majority of people who were happy he'd done it, and he has said himself that, oh well, the vast majority of Sunderland fans would be happy, but there will have been people who were saying, well, that's a ridiculous amount of money, why have you gone and done that? You're not going to keep everyone happy all of the time. And the club and him personally, I would wager, would be a lot better off if they just focused on running it in what I think is probably termed a professional manner. There's a reason other chairmen don't run their football clubs like this.
Exactly. I mean, other people, everyone says, oh, I don't look at this, and I don't look at Facebook and Instagram, but obviously people do, or they have people who do for them.
You have to say that, then you clearly do.
Exactly. But I think they're spending too much time and energy, and then only getting negative energy back when things aren't going well at the club. So they should just kind of put that all to one side and then concentrate on turning it around instead of worrying about what people say about them. Because whatever you do in life, if you're in the public eye, there's going to be people out there slagging you off, you know, whether you're a musician or an actor or a footballer, and you've like really it's your job to ignore that and do the job at the best of your ability. If you're spending too much time sort of getting negative vibes off social media, then it can't be helping things on the pitch, and obviously it isn't.
But when they sacked Ross at around the same time that was happening, or just before, Stuart Donald was on Twitter replying to fans. And it's like that exact afternoon he was replying to fans, and it's like
they said that's what they were going to do, you know, like with the whole sort of plan to start with, and that's obviously great during a honeymoon period. But like the disadvantages of saying you're going to do that when things start going to shit.
Yeah,
then,
but this is the thing,
you know.
and it has an impact on, like, it'll have an impact on your employees. Like, look, I don't know Jack Ross's views on it, but if he knew Stuart Donald was doing that while he was getting sacked or he was about to get sacked, he's probably thinking, well, hang on, have you not got bigger priorities to be dealing with? And
well, that's it. The players will be sending each other screenshots of what Stuart Donald has been saying on Twitter,
this is
talking
the thing,
about it
isn't
in
it?
the dressing room in the morning when they're getting ready for training.
Thinking, Jesus Christ, what's Boss doing now?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
and that's the thing. Like, and look, I'm not. I think whenever things are going bad in football, people always say who's to blame. Often it is like a multitude of people. It's not just the players, it's not just the managers, it's not just the owners, it's not just whomever else. It is a collective thing, and I think collectively, for whatever reason, what's going on at this football club at the minute just isn't good enough from the top to the bottom.
Yeah. I think maybe just to bring this, because we're gonna finish here, I think, just about, but to bring that to a close, I think the issue ultimately that we have is that in the honeymoon period, like you say, it's a very nice thing to have. It's a very novel concept to have the owners so engaged when we were so disengaged by the owners in the hierarchy for so long. So to be reconnected so strongly was refreshing. You know, it was revitalising for the Sunderland fans. But I think maybe we could even say as well, in our sort of haste, we neglected to think, what if this goes horribly wrong? What will happen when Stuart and Charlie aren't flavour of the month anymore, which was always bound to happen at some point, I think. You know, it was never going to be sunshine
It was always
and
based on
lollipops forever.
having to go up last year.
Yeah.
and like
That
we
was the
didn't.
thing, wasn't it?
And then instead of sort of like bouncing back from that and saying this is what we need to do, they were still caught up in the takeover business because you would be anyway.
Of course
you know,
you would.
like and it's not their fault that, you know,
But the
Mark
problem
Campbell
is,
one wasn't, you know, didn't go through, and then the second one, you know, obviously there was lots of different people interested, as we all know, you know.
I think the problem is that, look, they've admitted themselves, like, at the club, there's pretty much like a skeleton staff. Like, there isn't, like, I've just talked about Tony Davison there. To my knowledge, he hasn't been replaced. I could be wrong, but
No, he hasn't. I think the thing with Davison and Mark was that most of their work's based around selling the boxes for the start of the season, and this is kind of like a quiet period. So I think they've looked at, I'm not saying it's right, by the way, I think they've looked at it and thought, actually, we can probably get away without employing somebody in that position for 4 months until we start selling boxes for next year. And like, let's face it, if they were trying to sell boxes for next year, who the hell would want to buy one at the minute? You know?
What my point was going to be, like, going back to what you said about the takeover, though, is that if the people who own the club are wrapped up in a takeover, which, look, it's going to take up a lot of their time trying to sell a business, if there isn't someone in the level just below them to oversee the day-to-day, that's where you see the kind of drift sort of thing. So they can't be in, with all the will in the world, however many hours they want to work a week, they can't be in two places at once. And like, I think what you said before, Martyn, was spot on. Like, we were told, no, don't worry about it, it's not going to make a difference. Well, actually, that's probably a bit of a red flag, because why you see it? Because nobody really said, is this going to make a difference, kind of thing. They just came out and said it. And it's like, well, if you've got someone who's running the day-to-day anyway, like, you probably won't have as marked an impact. But like I say, I'll go back to what I said at the start. I think you look at the lack of marketing around the club at the minute, and to me, that suggests that it very much came from the top down last year, and it no longer is. And I just think, like I say, sack as many managers as we like, get as many new players in January, but I think fundamentally the club needs, and Ross said it, journalists who, to be fair, probably close to Ross, have said it, they need to get a structure in place that's like befitting a club of this size.
Would you kind of go for a director of football model? And
truthfully, under the current regime, I would be reluctant, just because, to my mind, for Stuart Donald to come out and say Richard Hill saved this football club is a massive alarm bell, because I don't know I don't know what qualities or qualifications he had to get the role he has, which we were told, by the way, that he would have no first team involvement when he did arrive, which appears not to be the case. So I don't know that a director of football would fix things at the minute. Certainly not if it's a rushed decision. If it's something that they've been thinking about for a while and they've got the guy, possibly.
Just in terms of recruitment in
terms of recruitment, I think they certainly need to replace the current setup, because it isn't working. Like we're seeing players who like that Fossey who we mentioned earlier, who are signing for clubs in this league, who we can all agree would demonstrably improve us.
Yeah.
Now, if the people in charge of our recruitment aren't capable of seeing those sorts of things, then I am concerned. And I think, Mark Campbell, I think we all know the money wasn't there, or didn't appear to be there, and that's presumably why that one fell through. But he did have a guy with him. He was a director of football, and they had people who they targeted. Now, it's very easy to say that and assume that they would have gone well, but at least they did seem to have a plan with regards to that. Whereas, like I said earlier, I think with us, it does feel like who is available. So in that sense, I mean, potentially yes, but I think you would have to rip up the current recruitment team and start again, truthfully.
I think so. Well, I think that's a good place to leave it today. Really, really sort of like very profound bit of dialogue there from everyone involved. So we always finish as we do, just by predicting the next game. Now, it's the last thing I want to think about, really, because we're back off to Gillingham, the team that have just knocked us out the first round of the FA Cup. So we'll just go around the table very quickly, give us the score and give us who you think the goal scorers will be. You don't have to say it. If you want to say who Gillingham's goal scorers are, and you're more than welcome to say that, of course.
I'd be struggling on that.
We know enough about
I was going to say
right now.
Well, Tom Eaves is gone, so I mean, I don't know who else you've got, but anyway, we'll go to you first of all, Shaun.
I think Gillingham will win 2-1.
Right. Who do you think? Who's our goal scorer going to be? It's going to bounce off someone's bum, isn't it?
What more?
Yeah, fair enough. Why not? Chris, how about you?
I think we'll get a point.
I'm optimistic.
It sounds bad that makes it sound like I'm being optimistic.
It actually does.
I'll say 1-1 McGeady.
Yeah, fair enough.
I was going to go for a draw, but 0-0, because I feel like a clean sheet would be progress.
Clean sheet would be
progress.
And I can't see. I don't know who's got goals in them in the minute. But like you say, 0-0 or 1-1 would actually be. Would we even settle for that now? Is that how bad things have become?
The performance.
We need to bottom out, but
we need
I've been thinking that for several years.
Well,
we need to get away from somewhere, because it's just getting really dire now, isn't it?
Hang on, let me just very quickly Google Gillingham's team before I give you my prediction. Let's see. Google.
He's totally prepared for this.
I am Gillingham FC. This is all just like an act of front. I actually know their goal scores off by heart, because
this is where they haven't updated the Wikipedia for months. And
I know, and I give you like Tom Eaves, don't I?
Tony Cascarino.
Jesus. Right, so I think it'll be 1-0 down at half time. Brandon Hanlon will score. We'll get a work to do emoji, and then the bicep. You know how that goes. Full time, we've lost 2-0. Alex Jakubiak on loan from Watford, number 23, who's Scottish. He's going to get their second goal, finish 2-1.
You're going to have to stick a bit on this now.
You're
going to get some canny odds here.
Honestly, right, I bet that's not even like a bad guess, to be honest. But anyway, I just think we're going to lose 2-1, and I think it's going to be Mingen again, because that's how I feel right now. So anyway, thank you very much once again to Sunderland University for letting us record our podcast in your studio. Make sure you get the latest ROKER Report podcast as soon as they're released. Remember to subscribe on iTunes whenever you listen, and stay up to date with the panel who've joined us today. Please head over to YouTube and subscribe to SAFC Fan TV to see more work from more of God's work from Shaun Middleton and co. after the match, interviewing the irate contingent of Sunderland fans who grow in their numbers every week. You can also hear from Wise Men Say podcasts every Monday and Thursday. And finally, Love Supreme. Content is available in print and online for merchandise, away day travel, and top quality pre-match bait is all there if you pop in the Roker End Cafe at a Love Supreme HQ. So thank you very much, Martyn, for coming in.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Aye, and thank you, Shaun.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Aye, so here's hoping that things don't become completely unbearable. I'm not particularly optimistic, and I don't think anybody else in this room is. So thank you very much, and good night.